Hello and welcome again to the Change Exchange, where today we're talking change to Katy Katapodis. She's the editor-in-chief. She just said she was once called the editor-and-chief, and she never corrected that person.
I loved it.
The editor-in-chief at Primedia's Eyewitness News, and also now a familiar face on television since the Oscar Pistorius and the Shreen Divani trials. Thank you very much for being here.
Hello, Ruda. Thanks for the invite.
Let's start at the beginning. Did you always want to be a journalist? How did it happen?
I always had an inquiring mind and I loved reading newspapers. And funnily enough, a few years ago, I was asked to contribute to a book, a letter to your 16-year-old self, which I thought was such an amazing exercise. And part of the exercise was to find something from when you were 16. And so I went through my mother's house and I went through all her things and I found newspaper clippings that I had cut out from major news events while I was 16, because I saw there was the date. And I thought, oh, wow, I'd actually forgotten about that. But there you have it. Clearly it was in my blood from a very, very young age.
And was it always radio, or did you first want to do print, or how did you see it?
Funnily enough, I was a talk radio listener from a very early age. My mother converted me. I mean, we would have to listen to talk radio on the way to school. And first it was like, oh, please, Ma, it's actually not cool. And at that point, it was Radio 5 that all my friends were listening to. No, not us. We had to listen to talk radio. And eventually, I got so used to it that I loved it. I ended up switching on myself. And I remember having a moment where Brett Hilton Barber, he was the then political editor for 702, was on air talking about the political events just pre-94. And I just paused and I thought, wow, I wish I could do something like that. That is really cool. And I was still in high school at that stage. And then I went to university. I did a general BA degree. At some point I wanted to study drama. My Greek father said to me, forget it. It's not happening. And I said, fine, I'll just do a general BA degree. And I slowly found my way into radio, into media and journalism.
But you already had a picture in your mind of what the best of that genre sounded like. And that's so fantastic. Then you started with community radio.
I did. I think that's the best grounding. And I often say, you know, to young reporters who come through our newsroom, they say, oh, I've only been at community radio. So never dismiss it. That's the best grounding. It's the best kind of training you can get. I started at community radio. And in community radio, everybody does everything. You know, you answer phones, you're on air, you're just doing a whole lot. And it was really fantastic.
And there's little pressure. It's a good space to just learn.
And to fall. And to make mistakes, and that's okay. So you could, and it's not to say that there were, you know, these millions of listeners or viewers. It was actually fine to find your feet. And then at one point, I received a call from David O'Sullivan. I was still doing community radio, and David O'Sullivan was providing us with news from a company called Broadcast Resources. It was associated to Primedia, and he said to me, "Send me your CV." And there better not be one effing spelling mistake in it. Otherwise, I will throw it away. And I thought, okay. I think I was too afraid to say no. And so I sent him my CV.
And that was the door that opened to 702?
Yes, that was the beginning of that.
And what was that change like? I mean, from that protected, contained space of community radio to 702?
Well, you know, I've never actually told anybody this. You're the first one, Ruda, but I considered not going. I considered not doing it.
Why?
Because I'm wearing this badge that says love change. And I know that I forced myself, I've taught myself to love change. But I've never really been a fan of change. I mean, my furniture in my house is exactly the way it has been. Don't ask me to move houses. Don't ask me to move offices. I'm very much a creature of habit. And so there I was in this community home of mine where we had lunch together and we had dinner together. And I met my husband there. So it was very much about this community, and somebody was asking me to change drastically and go into a corporate environment. So at some point I considered not doing it, and it was actually my then boyfriend, now husband, who gave me a kick up the backside and said, don't be ridiculous. I mean, are you joking with me? You have to do this. And I took a deep breath and I said, here we go, fine, I'll do it.
And then before you were 30, you were editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
Editor-and-chief.
The editor-and-chief came slightly later. So it was news editor to begin with. And, you know, at that point, 702 had been going through some turmoil. It was a difficult time for all of us as reporters. We just kind of sat there in the background as we watched
what kind of turmoil?
Politics take place. the listenership had just completely gone down. You had this listenership at 702 that was doing so well, a radio station that helped define, in my mind, the end of apartheid. It got people talking in a really significant and meaningful way. And then at some point it lost its way. It lost its way, and there was a shock jock on morning radio. It was Gareth Cliff at the time, who I adore. I mean, I love Gareth. I think he's amazing. But he was ahead of his time, or at least 702 was ahead of its time at that point. The listeners just didn't.
And maybe the radio, maybe there needs to be a kind of definition so that when you as a listener tune into this station, you know that that's what you will get.
Yes,
and they lost their clarity.
They lost their clarity. So here was this young, brilliant man who was telling jokes and doing pranks and doing things in a very fresh and new way. And we weren't talking politics, and we weren't talking crime, and we weren't talking South Africa and transformation. And I think this got the audience a little bit because they weren't sure what to expect. And we lost a lot of listeners at that point.
So when you took over, what did you focus on?
Well, when I took over, it's also an interesting story because at some point I left the newsroom. I left the newsroom, and Dan Moyani at the time said to me, would you like to do an evening talk show? I said, I'd love it, actually. I'm very young. I don't know what I know, so I'm quite green. But yes, let's give it a try. So together with my co-host, Benedict Macher, we went into talk. And then Dan called me back about 18 months later. He said, we need you in the newsroom. We need you back. Could you consider coming back? And I was so happy that he'd asked me because I loved doing the talk show, but ultimately I wasn't involved in that day-to-day news process. And I said, yes, I definitely
You like the hard news.
I love it. I love it. I love that adrenaline rush. It can kill you eventually, but I love it. And I went back to news, Ruda, and then they said, well, at some point, well, you know, you're 25, 26 at the time I was, 20, just about turned 27. We don't have a news editor, could you be it? And I thought that made
Was it a bit
mistake.
frightening?
It was hugely frightening because I had far more senior colleagues now who I was in charge of and I needed to manage. And it
How
was,
did they
it was
respond?
quite daunting. Most well, some not so well. Some not so well. And I remember an encounter with a much more senior colleague, an experienced, and someone I really respected, who basically said, look, I have to leave. You're younger than me by half my years. He was in his 50s. And I don't think I can report to a young woman, actually. So I think I'm going to leave. And, you know, at that point, I just thought I need to just find my strength now and say, well, I wish you the best of luck, as opposed to fall apart. Because that would have been the response for some, but for me it was, well, I'm sorry, you know, that we can't work together. Cheers. Good luck.
Was it also about the fact that you're a woman?
It was. And he verbalized that. You're a younger woman and I just can't do it. And I got a sense that behind the scenes, perhaps he had been wrangling for that position as well. I don't know. I chose to stay out of it, but I think it did have something to do with that.
How were you brought up as a girl? What did your father expect you to become in this life?
You know, it's so interesting because my father, I come from a family of 2 daughters and a son, so it's the 3 of us. And my father, both my parents actually, said you can do anything and be anything you want, which interested me.
That
Because
is such a gift to especially to a girl.
But it was also a contradiction, if you like, to my current family structure, what my family structure was. So my father was the breadwinner, the head of the household. My mother was a stay-home mom. And so to hear them say that was really refreshing, and not to expect us just to fit into that mold. So it really was refreshing. I mean, that's obviously what worked for my parents. And this was my mother's role, and my mother's, it was her calling actually. She loved, and still to this day, loves nothing more than nurturing her family.
But they made it clear that that isn't the definition of a woman. It is her personal choice.
Very clear.
As I say, it's such a gift. How did you experience did you then have to move into kind of management rather than being out there on the beat?
That was a difficult transition as well, because there I was out there reporting on stories, out and about, or either anchoring news, being out in the field, and then suddenly I was office bound. I was office bound, needing to manage. And so I had a bit of a tug of war with myself. Do I give up my on-air role just to be a manager, or do I do both? And having a crazy streak, I convinced myself I could do both. And I did do both for a long time. So I would wake up at a really early hour of the morning. At 3:30 in the morning, I'd be up. I would read on the John Robbie show, and I would finish reading at 9 o'clock. And then I would say, now my job starts. Now the real job starts. That was my hobby, anchoring on air until 9. Now the real job starts. So the hours were very long.
Sure.
Yeah.
That you took something on yourself there, right?
I did. Until after I had my son, actually. Still, I was doing it. Up until I had my first little one. And then I thought, oh, I actually don't know if this is sustainable.
There are only so many hours in the day. And television, Katie, did that door just open, or was it something that you were looking at?
Ruda, I've never applied for a job in my life. They've always come to me somehow. So that same way that David O'Sullivan said to me, send me your CV, and the expletive about the spelling was pretty much how television happened last year. I had met with Carte Blanche's executive director, George Mazarakis, to talk about a working relationship between Carte Blanche and Eyewitness News as a whole. And we'd explored the possibility of working around Oscar. I loved the idea of the pop-up station. I thought it was different, it was fresh. South Africa needed something like this. And I immediately said, yes, I think the team must be involved. And so we started getting involved in some rehearsals with the team as a whole, and anchoring was never a part of the brief. He had said to me, we'd like you as a guest from time to time. If you wouldn't mind being a guest on our editor's slot, just to talk about Oscar, coverage of the trial and that kind of thing. I said, with pleasure, no problem. But we do need some rehearsals. He said, yes, you guys do need a whole lot of rehearsals. Come over. And so we went for our first rehearsal. And George said to me, could you please not leave after we're done? And I said, sure. And then he came down and said, look, actually, we'd like you to host this editor's slot, if you wouldn't mind. I said, what? And he said, yes, we'd like you to host it. Now we need you to really start rehearsing with us.
How did you experience the camera? You know, and suddenly having every gesture, every expression out there.
I am a very expressive person, and so often my face tells you exactly what I'm thinking, and my hands, as you can see, are pretty much all over the place. So it was more structured for me, and I often had to remind myself on air, Ruda, mind your face. I know he's talking crap in front of you, whoever the guest may have been. If there was a moment where they weren't making much sense, just mind your face, because radio, you kind of, if you've got somebody on the phone, you go, really? Like, really? Or you chat to the producer on the other side of the camera and you go, whatever, you know, crap, it's not talking right. But on TV, it's very much far more controlled, and just mind what you're doing with your face and with your hands.
And the sudden, very public exposure, because radio is different.
Yes.
Television is a weird animal.
Yes. George said to me, this will change your life.
Yes.
He said, this will change your life. People will stop you in the spot.
Yes.
And so they did.
And you didn't, did you believe him?
At first you think, well, I'll take it in my stride. You know, I'll take it in my stride. It is what it is. But it really is very much about, you know, those odd stares that you get and people not quite sure. And so often I've got, but don't I know you from somewhere? And it's happened from air crew on airlines. It's like, don't I know you? I don't have a standard response for that. So I go, maybe. But it was very much about people now recognizing.
But it sounds as if you said you don't really love change, but you've stepped up to the plate time and time again. You know, something was available, it was difficult, it was different, and you just said, okay, well, deep breath, let's try this.
And have fun while doing it. So for the whole of last year, I was pretty much working 2 jobs. So I would have my daytime EWN work, and then I would go, and as I would often say, play on TV at night. So I had my daytime job and then play on TV. Yeah.
Let's talk about your family, because you have 2 small sons under the age of 10. How do you manage that?
With a lot of help. With a lot of help and an amazing support structure. And they're really cool little boys, I must say. They're really lovely, and they understand that mom works. It's become a part of our lives. There's nothing unusual about mom leaving before they go to school sometimes, or coming a little bit later. During Oscar, they didn't see me much, admittedly, because we would finish really late at night, and by then they were fast asleep. And so with a lot of support, my husband's very hands-on. I have an amazing housekeeper at home. I mean, Gogo runs our house. She is the captain of that ship, certainly, and an amazing mom. An amazing mom who fetches boys from school in the afternoon, settles them, hands them over to Gogo, and she will deal with them until either their dad or I get home.
So there is actually an extended family.
very much.
It's not a nuclear.
No, very much
two parents and the children.
No, and we work together.
Yeah.
I mean, they know. Everybody knows we're here to help each other and to work with each other and just make this life of ours work, actually.
But have they changed you?
My boys, definitely. Oh, definitely. They've made me much softer. So, doing a story about children pre-being a mother was par for the course, you know. It was one of those things. You did it as you would cover another story. Now, children being affected in the news in some way is deeply, deeply devastating for me. You know, we had that case of Tagrin Morris. Do you remember little Tagrin Morris? He was the 4-year-old in Riker Park who was dragged to his death last year. Ruda, that story, it touched me in such a deep place in my heart. And I kept on thinking, why has this upset me so much? Because there are so many stories that we cover on a daily basis. And I mean, the similarities are just there. A 4-year-old, I had a 4-year-old at the time, sitting in a car with mom and dad.
It's very close to the bone.
Very, very close to home. So much so that for a long time, I couldn't, for the first time actually, I switched off when I was listening at some point. I've never, ever switched off an EWN bulletin. That particular day, to hear that mother talk about the loss of her child like that, I couldn't listen. So that certainly has changed me in that respect.
And do you try and protect them?
I do. So news is very much a part of our world. At home, it's very much a part of my world. But I have found myself more and more, especially now that they're getting older and understand, having more private conversations, because the phone will ring, we might be having dinner, and if I see it's the office, I know it's something, I'll walk away, because the nature of the call can be quite distressing for them. And in fact, my 8-year-old said something quite fascinating on this past Sunday. We were driving and the news bulletin was on. And there was silence in the car, as there often is, and we listened, and nothing particularly gruesome. And then he said to me, you know, Mom, sometimes I really wish you didn't work in news. And I said, why did you say that? He said, so many children get hurt, Mom. And I said, yeah, I know, it's really sad. And you try to empathize with them. And then, you know, that you just try to shield them in some way, as best you can, Ruda, as best you can. They'll be exposed to it in some way, though.
Sure, but it's hard when he realizes it so clearly, and he expresses it so clearly.
Articulates it, but so clearly, so I know exactly where he is on it.
You wrote a book called I'm Missing News.
Yes.
Where did the title come from?
It actually came from him. It came from my eldest son. He was about 2 or 3 at the time, and he kept on saying, I'm missing news, I'm missing news. I didn't quite understand what he was saying. And then there was a news bulletin, which I put on a little bit louder. And in fact, he said to me, Mommy, we're listening to I'm Missing News. And I realized that this child has been trying to say eyewitness news. But I just thought it was fabulous because, you know, when you're at home, you feel like you're missing what's happening in that newsroom environment. And when you're in the newsroom, you just feel, well, I wonder what's happening, what I'm missing in that home environment.
And what was your book about?
It was pretty much about those two worlds, about this world of 24/7 breaking news, adrenaline, the hardcore stuff that we deal with, because it is quite hardcore. You know, it's a world of politics and corruption and death and crime and blood and that difficult side. And then it's juxtaposed by these soft cuddles and soccer practices and these very soft little boys that I have, and trying to kind of find how to merge these two worlds of mine without falling apart in the process.
It is still only women who are asked, how do you find the balance?
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
It has to change at some point. I take a deep sigh. It's like deep, because Ruda, it has to change. We can't keep putting these expectations on women. Like, women must be the ones who will fit into this perfect mold at home, but still fit into a mold in the workplace as well. It has to shift somehow. And society needs to try and shift that. So we can't put these expectations of, oh, but you work, and how do you balance it with your children? Well, I've got a great husband, actually. And he really does his fair share of whatever needs to be done at home. And when he's not there, then I take over. We just do it. We're a team, and it's this teamwork. But nobody has asked my husband, how do you balance your business with your children? Ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, I think we share that.
Yes.
I also have a husband who, I mean, without him, I couldn't have done it and bring up a child.
Aren't you so grateful?
Absolutely. But it's also so good for the children because they have a very close relationship to the father.
Yes.
Because when they're very little, sometimes daddy's the only one there. So there's a connection that I think kids who are brought up mainly by the mother might miss.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And so they know they can rely on mommy or daddy for anything, actually. Whether or not they've left homework at school, as was the case yesterday, and we had to go, daddy had to go back to school and wait for somebody to unlock the classroom so we could get the home. Whether it's that, and then it's daddy or mommy.
Or you need a cuddle.
It's
you
interchangeable.
can go to either.
It's not either this one or that one. It's very much interchangeable.
And tell me about your husband. Where did you meet? You said at work. And
Yes.
when did you know that he was the right one? And
Oh,
why?
Not for a while. We met at this community station. He was never an on-air type. You know, he was also finding his way, working in the sales department at the time. And he kept on saying, we need to go out. Oh, no, I don't actually want to go out with you. It's really fine. Until at some point he said, I've got Bon Jovi tickets. You're coming with me. And I said, well, actually, I've got news for you. I'm going with my sister. We have our own tickets. So there was this little bit of a cat and mouse happening for a while. And we met when we were very young. I was still 21. He's the same age as me. And it was, I would say, we're dating for about 5 years before we decided to get married.
And what made you decide, okay, this could actually work?
Oh, he's just divine. He's just divine. He's very supportive. He's not... he's my fiercest critic, my greatest fan at the same. He's kind of everything that I need in a partner. So we're there to support each other. When I'm down, he will, as I said earlier, give me a kick up the butt and go, come on, you've got to try this, move on. You know you can do this. When this Oscar opportunity came around last year, I did have moments of angst. Where I thought, oh, self-doubt. I've never done TV. I don't know if I can do this. I know they're saying I can do this. I know they're saying I look okay on TV. But actually, I don't know, you know, and he was saying, you look fine, you will be fine, you know you can do this. I was appointed as Secretary General of SANEF, the South African National Editors Forum, last year. And again, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't know if I can. He said, are you joking? It's like SANEF, they've appointed you SG, it's a great honor, just do it. And where you can't manage here, I'm here, and where I can't, you'll be here. So it's that kind of real teamwork.
Yeah.
We just gel.
That's also something about change. If you have people around you who support you, who say this is not such a crazy idea as you may be thinking, it just makes it so much easier.
And they can cushion any hard knocks you might get.
What was the best thing about your wedding?
The best thing about my wedding? Oh, everything. Absolutely everything. I also suffer from a princess syndrome. So while I have this hard news exterior, I have a bit of a princess complex in the meantime. So this was my ideal platform to let that kind of play out in the real world. It was just wonderful. We had fun. It was fabulous. My big fat Greek wedding is what it was. Yeah.
And how has being married changed you? Do you think it has? Oh,
you grow together.
Being part of a couple does change one.
I've loved it. I can't say that it's changed me towards the negative. We've grown together. We have had ups. We've had downs, as with every relationship. It's helped me grow and mature and evolve as a person.
And what makes it work from day to day? Because it's not always easy.
No.
Being half of a couple is not easy.
Just talk, understand.
Yes.
I'm like passionate, so I fight. When I fight, I fight. If I think you're wrong, you're wrong. And I will say it as it is. And he does the same. And so we just honest with each other all the time. You know, I think that wasn't great. You know, what was that about? We can just have those very open conversations. And ultimately, we also know that the structure of ours is not just the two of us. We have these two children who look at us with their big black eyes. You know, my children have got these big round brown eyes that you can kind of get lost in, you can drown in. So they're looking up to us as well. And we want to be good role models for them. Will we get it wrong? Definitely. I mean, we're human, ultimately. We will get it wrong, and I often say to friends, I'll say to my girlfriends, girls, no matter what we do, our children will end up in therapy and blame us at some point in their lives about how we messed them up. So we're trying the best we can for now.
Start a fund. As you do for university, start a fund for therapy.
No, they must pay for that for themselves.
And tell me about your home. You say that it's you're very homebound and you don't like moving, etc. Where are you?
So our first home we were in for 12 years. And then we thought, okay, it's time to move. Family's getting a bit bigger. And I resisted that change. I was like, no, I love this place. I'm attached to this place. I really can't move from here.
I chose this place.
Yes, exactly that. And my fig tree. I was attached to this fig tree. And what am I going to do about my fig tree? And I love these figs. It's like, okay, we'll get another fig tree. I don't think that should be the reason we don't move house. And at some point, it's actually a very funny story. At some point, my mother's next door neighbor was selling. And Costa, my husband, said to me, well, why don't we go and have a look at this house? It looks really nice. And I said, forget it. It's not happening. I'm not living next to my parents. It's just, no. And so he said, you're being ridiculous. We don't even know what the inside of this house looks like. Like, let's just go and look. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. And then one Sunday afternoon, we were having lunch at my mother, and the house next door was on show. And I said, fine, let's go, fine, I'm going. So he said, great, let me phone the owner, who we happen to know because he'd been neighbors with my mom for a long time. And he said, no, I've just signed an offer to purchase. I'm sorry, you're too late. And he growled at me. He said, you know, just for once, just listen to me. I told you we should go and have a look at this. I was like very sheepishly, sorry, I know, I'm sorry. It doesn't matter, it's meant to be. I reasoned and I rationalized it, it's meant to be. Don't worry.
The angels didn't proclaim it ours.
Yes. Until 6 weeks later, I get a call on a Sunday morning from said owner of house who says, actually, the deal has fallen through. Are you interested? Well, I don't know. I said, I need to speak to Costa and see. So he said, yes, we're interested. Tell him we're going. We're going to have a look. And we went and we had a look. And it's a lovely place. It's an old house, which we renovated and made our own.
What sold it to you? Apart from the fact that your mum and a potential babysitter lived next door, what sold the house to you?
It had a beautiful energy about it. It had such a lovely, there were lots of windows and open spaces. And so, and it did remind me a little bit of my old place. Yes, so that was like, I could be really comfortable here. But it was a lovely energy. And then I got excited about the project. Then it was, but if we take that wall down and replace it with another wall there, and if we extend this room and do that there, and suddenly I became excited. Having my parents next door was an added benefit, for my children especially.
I'm sure. And is there something that you take, that you put down next to your bed first, and this is now, I've claimed this space, this is mine?
My books. My books are mine. And so when we moved into our first house, the first thing I did was have a special bookshelf made, which I realized a year or so later was just far too small, so we needed more space. My books are my thing. So let me deal with my books. You can do the DVDs and the CDs or whatever, because my husband has a passion for music, and you can do all of that, and I will deal with the books. And then that makes it our space.
Katie, thank you so much. I must ask one more question.
Yes.
Do you have plans for the future? But you don't have the 5-year plan syndrome.
No, you can't work, not in news. When the year started, I thought to myself, I hope these news gods are kind to us this year, and we don't have the tumultuous year that we had last year. Last year was a really tough news year, not just because of this Oscar story and me having to do it, but it was a really, really hard news year. Lots of things happening, one breaking story after the next. So I thought, I hope that this year the news gods smile on us and we have a somewhat quieter year. They don't like us, the news gods. They don't like us at all, because the year has really started quite, from a news perspective, Ruda, really there's a lot to do, there's a lot on the go. We've had a lot happening. So no, I can't find myself planning in those 5-year, it's not me. I've planned up until my August holiday, and I know that I've got X amount to do work-wise and X amount to do holiday-wise until August, and after that we'll see. Whatever comes along.
Enjoy every day, and
And
thank
I'll
you for
try to love
visiting.
change in the process.
Okay.
Thanks, Ruda.